When you're fed up with fighting food and your body, join us here. I'm Ali Shapiro, creator of the Truce with Food program and your host for Insatiable, where we explore the hidden aspects of fighting our food, our weight, and our bodies, and dive deep into nutrition science and true whole health. Fair warning, this is not your parents' health care. This is a big rebel yell to those who crave meaning, hunger for truth, and whose lust for life is truly insatiable. Believe me, freedom awaits. Welcome, everybody, to Season 7 of Insatiable. This season, our theme is hunger and taking a fresh look at different approaches to satisfying our hunger. To be physically and emotionally hungry is to be vulnerable. As Dr. Brené Brown says, vulnerability is uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. To have physical hunger or to acknowledge our emotional and soul hungers is to choose to be open to the daring risk of being fully satisfied. We will be exploring various diets and approaches to satisfying our holistic hungers. Before we get to our fabulous guest today, during our transition episodes to Season 7, I had hinted at something about if you love the conversations we had here and are all about exploring and experimenting to find the radical truth for every body you have, your physical, emotional, and soul body, I had something exciting to share with you. Drum roll. Introducing the Insatiable membership community. This community is designed to help you take action around the topics we discuss here on the podcast and support you to find your radical truth of what works best for you, both food and emotional wise. I rolled it out privately last year to clients, new and old, and the results have shown me there is a real need for a community where we can trust ourselves, learn from each other, and as we get healthier, want to take more daring risks to make life choices, potent healing medicine. I'm now opening it up to Insatiable listeners. In a nutshell, it's a community where there are no gurus and we learn from each other. Once a month, we have a mastermind topic that helps you gain clarity and have a group to support and learn from wherever you are in your path. And once a month, there's also a Q&A call with me where I coach attendees to get inspired, unstuck, and clear on your next step. We start a fresh new season of topics in March where we'll be focused on a fresh, renewed look at our hunger. You can find more details at alishapiro.com/IC2019. All right, so today we are going to talk about the hunger for weight loss with my very special guest, Dr. Tina Boogren, who has been a previous guest on the podcast and is a client of mine. I guess former client, but current friend. Dr. Boogren is a former classroom teacher, English department chair, teacher, mentor, instructional coach, professional developer, athletic coach, and building level leader. She has presented at the school, district, state, and national levels and has been a featured speaker at the International Literary Association Annual Conference and Barnes & Noble's Educators Night. I will put her full bio and accolades on the website, but know that she holds a bachelor's degree from the University of Iowa, a master's degree with an administrative endorsement from the University of Colorado, Denver, and a doctorate from the University of Denver in educational administration and policy studies. And Tina, I love that you said the hill you are going to die on is self-care for teachers and educators, right?
Yes.
I love that. That's so rebellious. I feel like maybe because I grew up with two teachers, but I feel like the world doesn't understand how hard teaching is.
Right. Totally agree with that. Yes. I've had the pleasure and honor of, but my job, I'm an author and educational consultant, so I get to travel all over. It's mainly the US and sometimes Canada. So I've worked almost in every state. I think there's just a couple states I haven't been to, but in doing the work for almost 9 years now, which the beginning of the work was all focused on research-based instructional strategies, which are fantastic. I work for Dr. Marzano, who's a legend in the field, and his work is just amazing. But what I found in the field as a practitioner was that none of those strategies matter if the person who's delivering the strategies is so depleted and burned out, as so many of our teachers are exceptional teachers are. So it just became this relentless passion and pursuit of trying to figure out how I could help them, because the statistics are just so daunting of we're losing teachers, and we're actually losing our most phenomenal teachers that have the highest student achievement gains because they're just so depleted and worn out. It's the whole message the airplane message of securing our own oxygen mask before we assist others. So it's been so fun for the past probably year now. Most of my work has been focused on that, finding that balance between the research-based instructional strategies and pedagogy that we know to help all students. But the only way that we can do that is if we help support our teachers. So, and the only way that I can do that is if I model it myself. So it's kind of been this really, since you and I started working together, how many years ago, this journey that I've been on. So it's all really kind of related in a really fascinating and kind of holistic way, which I love. So it's been a fun journey. And yes, this is my hill to die on.
I love it though, because it gets us to think about root cause resolution, right? You're not calling it that, but that's what it is, right?
Right.
Like, let's look at the system that we're in. And I think that's really appropriate for what we're going to do today about, basically, this is going to be a pros and cons episode on Weight Watchers and weight loss. And before we get started, I want to explain to people how this episode came to be, because I was joking with Tina. I feel like talking about weight loss in the worlds that I straddle. So I straddle like multiple belief camps, right? I am in the health and medical world, which is different than weight loss, although the healthcare industry does push weight loss and it's also unaware of its own weight biases. I also am in the wellness world, which does push weight loss and status of, can you buy all the superfoods and do all the, things. And then the diet lifestyle world, I'm aware of like the trends of diets, right? Like keto or paleo or vegan that often push weight loss. And then I'm somewhat aware of body positivity, intuitive eating, and anti-diet worlds, who I feel are so anti-weight loss that this feels about as controversial as if we were talking about like vaccines or abortion.
Right.
And so I thank you for coming on to share your experience. So there's so much room to be misunderstood on this topic, and I hate being misunderstood, and it's something that I'm always afraid of like I fear happening. So I just want people to understand how this episode came to be. So I was planning this season in terms of pros and cons of various tools, coming at this that, hey, no tool is right or wrong for anyone. It's all about where you are in your journey. And my greatest growth in life has been when I sit with people who have different experiences with me. And so as I was planning this episode, I was mostly candidly had a con list of Weight Watchers because I had only remembered my experience and what clients come to me before they do the work on their relationship with food. And then Tina had posted on social media that you had done, and you called it WW. And I, even though it's a new name and we'll get into that, I knew it was Weight Watchers, right? That's kind of, we know it from a brand recognition sense. That's still Weight Watchers. And Tina was saying that you did Weight Watchers we're in 2018, and you lost weight and it really works for you. And I was like, I really respect, admire, and love Tina. So I reached out to you to say, like, what did you like about it? Like, what has changed? And you really educated me a lot on some of the shifts and changes and how it actually did work for you. And so I wanted to bring you on so that we could have a fair discussion. And I learned a lot doing the research. So that's how it came to be. And so I'm excited to talk about this today because it sounds like Weight Watchers is trying to rewrite its story as well. So let's talk about what took you, people might be confused because they said, hey, you worked with Allie before. You just mentioned that. And now you're doing Weight Watchers. And even though I say my program isn't weight loss, sometimes people still think it is, but it's not the goal of things. But I want you to explain why you went back to Weight Watchers, or if that was your first time, or how you came to do Weight Watchers in 2018. Let's just start there.
Yeah, perfect. Absolutely. So I did Weight Watchers years ago in college. I didn't gain freshman 15? I don't even know because I gained the freshman 35, 40. I don't even remember what it was. So a friend and I did Weight Watchers back in college and I got the lifetime status and kind of was on and off it for years. But back then, and that was the old program for sure. I mean, I just, like so many of your clients know, I just worked the system and then didn't work the system, right? So a lot of people know, especially back then, it was very much a point-based system. All foods were assigned points. So I easily could get away. And again, I was real young. So I was in my 20s. So all of my points went to pizza and beer. And nothing about it was healthy at all, right? It was total restriction. And of course, that's not what they're promoting, but that I could easily work the system and I'm good at figuring out loopholes and figuring the system. So it kind of worked and then it didn't work and then I stopped going. And I maintained the lifetime status for years, and then I stopped going for years. And I wasn't going then when I found you, Allie, and did all of that work. And when I went back to Weight Watchers, it was when they started shifting their program. And for me, it was an entirely different program for two reasons. Number one, because they changed their program. But number two, I came at it entirely differently. So I am not your typical, and again, they changed everything. They are now WW, which is Wellness That Works. I am not their typical probably client. I don't know what they call us. Member. That's probably what it is. Because I've done so much work with you of figuring out what works for me, what doesn't work for me. For me, the reason that I'm back and I continue to go, I still go, is my personality type works really well with accountability. I know it can feel really restricting and limiting to people, and I'm a big believer in different personality types. And just like you said when you were introducing this, I'm a huge believer in every person. Not everything works for everyone. And I have figured out I know that I cannot eat dairy. I can't eat gluten. I can't eat soy. I know I have spent years because of the work I did with you, Allie, of knowing what works for me and what doesn't work for me. So I don't use the system in a traditional sense. You know, they still have point systems. I do utilize their app for different things. It's good for me because it sparks just kind of reminders. I have built my own database within their system of the foods that work for me, and kind of just helps keep me pointed, my sales moving in the right direction, if you will. And I do really enjoy the community. I found a really great leader that I really love, and her focus is totally on wellness. I know different leaders are very different personalities, but I found, and she's all tattooed up, and I just love her. And I have a little group that I've joined. There's a few other teachers, and we kind of have side conversations off to the side of different ways to kind of think through the whole wellness piece. So I continue to go. I actually even started an Instagram account for my own accountability because it's, again, my own personality. It just helps me keep it at the forefront of my mind. And there's something to me about going and getting on the scale. And I know that scares people because I used to be like this. It used to, just totally derail me. And that scale meant everything. It's a 100% different relationship that I have with it now, that I am so pretty much stable now for the last, I don't know, probably year. I mean, I've gone up and down and I've lost some weight, but it's about probably trying to think of the timeline here. It doesn't really matter. Anyway, I've lost some weight, but it feels really stable now. And so the scale is just kind of my own. I don't think of it as the punishment piece. It's the just check-in. And that just really works for my personality. So it's a tricky balance. And it's funny because if people ask me, oftentimes people are always, if you lost weight, what did you do? What did you do? Because they're so desperate to jump on someone else's program. And we're always like, it doesn't matter what I did. Like it'll work for some, just like anything, just like paleo or just like keto or whatever the latest thing is. Any system will work not only if you work the system, but if you play by their rules. But as you know, more than anything in this community knows, that only lasts so long. You have to kind of strip it away and figure yourself out. So it works for me. And I say that because of the work that I did first with you.
Yeah. And and everyone, I didn't tell her to say that. She said that in the email.
Oh, absolutely not. I can 100% defend that. Absolutely.
But that's part of why I wanted to talk this through for people to hear is because what you're describing, and I talked about this a little bit with Dr. Will Cole on the Ketotarian diet, which is episode 4 of this season, the one right before Tina and mine. And, I was saying to him, because in his book, he talked about keto isn't a diet, it's a lifestyle. And I said to him, I know that all of you as practitioners want people to approach healthy eating as a lifestyle, but the person who hasn't worked through the relationship with food or who is struggling with food, right? Not everyone,
yep.
Struggles. It is going to be a diet. Even though you want it to be a lifestyle, it's going to be about restriction. And I think what you even said about the scale, right? It's not the scale, it's not food, it's not the system, it's how we relate to the system. And so you in college, right? And after, I love that you said pizza and beer because I used to buy all the Weight Watchers food when I did it in college, like right after college.
Right.
Remember eating those gross bars?
Totally. Yes.
They were
Yes,
chocolate.
it was only 4 points or whatever it was. Yes.
Well, they were like only 2 points, but then they were like one bite full. And so then
Yeah,
at least I ended up eating like 1,000.
and then I do the math. Okay, if I eat the whole box.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is that it's all about how we relate to any tool or any system. And one of the things that you had shared in the email and just shared now as well is about that accountability piece. And one of the things that, I wrote to my list about this, and I've talked about it a little bit on the podcast, but starting new habits or maintaining new habits is very different than stopping habits, right? Than stopping the binge or the overeating, or stopping, like, avoiding the food, like even paying attention to food, right? There's a difference between starting and stopping habits. And so because you had come to this place where you really knew what worked for you, I think that accountability piece is super helpful, right? Because you said it helps keep top of mind, but it's not a punishment. It's not a check-in of, do you get a gold? I know you say you like gold stars, but if the scale goes up or you don't, I don't know, do one of the things that they reward you for anymore, it's no longer like, oh my God, I have to beat myself up. It's like a
Absolutely.
more neutral, right? That's why I call it truce with food or truce with life. It's not that either is good or bad. It's, let me look at this rather than, and come at it from a very curious standpoint versus spiraling down because I can't figure out and judging myself that I didn't do this or that I gained weight.
Yes. Yes, totally. Absolutely agree with that. And the habits thing that you mentioned is fascinating because I've been studying habits a ton lately. So I'm in the process of reading right now the book Atomic Habits, and I wish I could tell you the author. But
someone else recommended it to me. I totally
yeah,
forget the
it's
name.
really good. It's just fast. I've read a number of books now, kind of come out the same way. What I love is he talks about in the very beginning this, like, approaching every day of just this, can I do 1% better today? And I just love that because I journal every morning, and that's one of the things, like, what could I do today in all, I'm not talking about like weight by any stretch, but what can I do to be 1% better today? Like in my career goals and family and relationships and all of that. So he talks about how really changing habits are not these big sweeping thing. It's just doing the 1% better every single day that adds up to, and then you look back and go, oh, holy cow, I've made these big changes. So that habits thing, and actually WW talks a lot about habits and really has been emphasizing that more and more, of just helping people understand that what those cues are that trigger some sort of reward and response and how we handle that. So there's been a lot of talk about that. And I think that's huge. Our whole lives are dictated by habits.
Yeah. And I haven't read the book, but I think one of the missing conversations, though, is, again, stopping habits versus layering on habits.
Yep. And he talks about both, the difference, and they're distinctly different. He uses this oh gosh, I feel like I should know. I really in the midst of reading right now, but he talks about, he took the whole idea of the cue, the trigger, and the reward. He just kind of expanded on that, but broke those down into these 4 different steps and what it looks like when you're trying to add a healthy habit, and the kind of opposite approach. It's distinctly different when you're trying to break a habit. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just think that's so important because, one of the things that I loved on your post was you talked about, like, staying on the treadmill longer when you added a podcast, right? And it's like,
yep.
And I think it's important that, and maybe you can even explain to people, because people who have worked with me, they find it so hard to explain to people, like, because everything changes, but nothing changes, right? Like, you're still approaching exercise or food. It's still the same food, the same exercise, but the way that you relate to it is so different. And so I think that's what's so important about why you got so much out of Weight Watchers, or I'm sorry, WW, is because, and it's called Wellness That Works.
I know, and you can call it Weight Watchers. That's how we all.
Yeah, this isn't a commercial.
So ingrained in us, but it is one of because they have made some pretty substantial and really honorable changes, and that I do applaud. One, that is one, but for goodness sakes, we all know that it's Weight Watchers, so it's all ingrained in our vocabulary.
Well, what they wanted to do from a marketing standpoint was keep those of us who knew what it was, but then the younger generation, train them.
Yes, totally. And they did change because now they really are removing the focus on, like, truly they're accepting all people, that even people that just want to focus on their health and never ever want to step on the scales. So that's that. And part of their rebranding was a lot of those kind of changes, which is all, I think that's all positive.
Totally. And that's why I was like, okay, this isn't just going to be like a bashing of Weight Watch. And I don't want to bash it. Like, there's always a tool. I just think it has to be in the right context. And the reason that I think it's so important for people to realize that it could be a diet or a lifestyle depending on where you are in your life. Is, one of the things that they had on their website is they say that your coaches will set a plan for you, right? And it's important for people to realize coaching is not someone else setting you a plan. They're using that term, which everyone is now, not just WW, but now that coaching has taken off, that's not coaching. And I think that's really important for people is coaching, that's training, that's the accountability that once you get to when you can relate to food, like I always think about it, like when you can shift your relationship to food, it becomes something neutral. Like, I don't know, the idea of like cleaning comes to me. Like, I don't love cleaning. I don't hate, well, I actually don't like it. So maybe it's not an example, but like if I felt neutral, like I feel good about organizing, right? Organizing some days, it's very neutral and I can approach food very neutrally now because there's no charge to it. And so once you get to a neutral place with things, accountability is really accountability. Like it's really helping you stay on track versus punishment, falling off. And I think the challenge is that they say they'll set you, the coach, Weight Watchers on their marketing will say your coach will set you a plan. And I just want people to realize that's not coaching, that's training. And coaching is a real skill set. And I talked about this on our second episode with Courtney Townley. And it's about coming to your own conclusions. And if you think of what Tina said at the top of the hour here, she had to do the coaching work. She happened to do it with me about what works for me. And I think the second piece to this that I really want to apply, I think that is great about Weight Watchers is the community that Tina mentioned. Because Tina, to your point, you have to be dairy-free, gluten-free, and soy-free, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the challenges is that unfortunately, it's so hard to be healthy in our culture. Like,
amen.
And it feeds into the deprivation narrative. And yet it doesn't have it. Like, it is hard, but it's not naturally hard, right? It's because
right. Soil it's availability.
Yeah, it's our soil is crap. It's our government subsidizes, sugar, soy, and wheat, and so healthy food is more expensive. Like we sit all day, so we're not naturally up and moving. Like, and I think that piece when you're really trying to get authentically healthy and not just like ironically eat Weight Watchers food or do a cleanse, having that community to support you in a targeted way to give you probably tips and tricks. Like you told me, your groups are like on the go and you travel so much. And how wonderful is it to get group intelligence of like, hey, this airport just added this, right? Or like,
yep, exactly.
Like I was in the Minnesota airport and there was like an organic restaurant and I like texted my sister and she was like, oh yeah, I've been on that one. I'm like, why didn't you tell me this? Like I was sitting there going, what am I going to eat for dinner?
Yes, that's exactly. Yep.
And so I think that is important once you know what works for you. Otherwise, this is the same way that any tool can turn into a weapon, or not a weapon, but a weapon is using the war metaphor, but the same tool can turn into something challenging. Because one of the things that I wanted to just mention though is, one of the frameworks that I look at is for people to help them start to break out of their patterns is, are we competing, avoiding, or accommodating? And you can find out your stress response, comfort eating style on my website at alishapiro.com. But if you're in a group, that same group, if you really are like, if you have a goal that you're really attached to and charge, and not that we don't want to be attached to our goals, but if you start comparing yourself to other people, which is what competitors tend to do when they feel very vulnerable, right? Like, why am I not getting as much ahead? How is everyone else able to do that? Or you start avoiding going, right? Because you feel different than the group. Or like accommodators, and this is more about exercise, but often not want to do group exercise if they have to feel like they have to be as strong and fit and they don't want to hold others back, right? There's all these emotional patterns that can turn a community into something that actually is sabotaging us. Just wanted to mention that.
Yeah. And you had mentioned earlier that you said it so beautifully. The same but different, the same. You said so nice of just, I'm doing the same thing, but it's totally different.
Yeah, everything's changed and nothing's changed.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, there it is. I got home late last night. I will blame it on a late flight. But I was thinking, I have such a perfect example of so I've always exercised, and it used to be as a punishment that truly the exercise was just 100% to just allow me to have the pizza and the beers. So I thought, kind of thing. And I I was a runner for a long time, and I ran, 13 half marathons and 2 full marathons. And if you asked me if I enjoyed running, I would tell you absolutely not. Like, I did it, and I am 100% the competitor. I'm also like Enneagram, the achiever, like all those frameworks. Yeah, that's where I fall. So I did all of that. And I remember, I think it was even you, Allie. It was definitely the time that we were working together. I think it was you that even asked, truly if I enjoyed running. And I said no. And I laughed. And it was like, why are you doing that? And I have stopped running. And it was the getting back to, as I found myself again, that kind of getting back to what I love. And I love to take long walks with my dog. I love to go to yoga. I love to go, I actually, and have changed my mentality where I don't follow some sort of program or plan or anything. I just kind of tune into what my body asks me to do, because I don't want the gym to ever feel like a punishment. I want to look forward to it. So especially when I've been home working all day, it's like, yes, I get to go to the gym. And when I get there, I just kind of do what feels good. And a lot of times it's listening to a podcast or an audiobook on the treadmill. And then I really love lifting weights, which is something that I didn't do before because I don't know why, but I love to do that. I love to stretch. So that's kind of I think that kind of personifies that whole idea of I've always worked out, but it's just such a different mentality now that it's something, I truly enjoy. I don't do it thinking about how many points am I earning back. It's a whole different approach, which feels really good.
Yeah, that was one thing I was thinking about, like in terms of like when like the community and the accountability is really helpful is like when you've already gotten momentum and like you're getting results, because there's always a learning curve in the beginning, right? Where you're kind of like, what do I like? What's working? Because part of why you really like you didn't like running, but it was helping you with the calorie deficit, right? And like once you realize, and this takes experimenting, this does not happen overnight. Once through our work, and I'm sure other work that you have done as well, is like once you realize that I can get results from like the result isn't just the end goal of like, is actually, can I enjoy the process? And can I enjoy this? Like, and same with food, right? A lot of times people think they're like winning at food if they're still a little hungry or they don't really like what they're eating, when like really what's healthy for you over time, especially as you get balanced, you actually start to crave that, of course, but there's a learning curve in there, right? And I feel like that's probably when it's not a great time to do WW, but it's great to do it once you're where you are, where like you have, I loved how you use the word return to myself. It's like you're very clear in your conviction, and not through research and data. This isn't just like, oh, this is what it is, right? Like you've experimented, you know what works for you from your health perspective. Because otherwise, I think, especially like I'm thinking the accommodator pattern, if you go there, you can think like everything someone suggests, it's like, maybe I should do that, right? Maybe I should adapt to that.
Absolutely. And it's funny you say that because I sit in meetings sometimes and it's like I can hear your voice in my head, Allie, because sometimes people say something and I cringe because I think, oh, no, and it's not wrong. It's never wrong. It's a different part of the journey, but it's like, oh, I used to be there and you're going to get stuck because you're not digging to the root cause of that. Like, I wish I could give you an example offhand, but it's just the listening, and you can hear in people. And I say this with so much love because I've been in every single one of those seats, but you can hear where they are on their journey by some of the contributions that they make during the workshops when I go. And it's exactly what you said. It's when I think I'm just repeating myself now, but it is when you come to it at different parts of the journey, it's going to be so distinctly different.
And how would you describe kind of that? Because one of the cons that I had, and you've mentioned it, is like WW is not going to change your relationship to food. If anything, it might reinforce the patterns that are there, right? Like if you're exercising to make up for what you eat, it's only going to reinforce that pattern. I thought of another way that, like, if you're trying to save your points, right, till the end of the evening, right? Eating rhythm is so important to our blood sugar, right? Like if you a lot of people have anxiety when their blood sugar crashes. So if you're kind of in this competitor response where you're just trying to get ahead during the day so you can like eat all the food at night, right? You're not going to understand why you're sabotaging yourself, because it's
and
you're going to game the system.
100%. And like another example is, so sometimes there'll be people having conversations. So everyone's allotted this certain amount of kind of daily points, and then you get these weekly points that you can use in different ways. And then I cringe because it starts to be conversations of, do you use your weekly points? And people sometimes say they don't use their weekly points, and then is so not healthy because I don't know, maybe you don't need your weekly points, but maybe you do. Like one of the ways that they've tried to steer people into a more healthy relationship is in their transition, in their new program, they talk about they have 200 free points, which are 0 point foods. And that's a list really of just healthy foods. It's fruits and vegetables and protein, like things with high carbs and sugar, things like that have higher points. So it's the point of that, and they say, is to help nudge people in the right direction. But it's also, again, if you don't have a full understanding, those quote unquote 0 point foods still, I mean, those add up. So you can't, if you're not tuning into your body, you can easily like overdo it if you're not checking in with yourself of how much you need. And, WW is thinking that you can only eat so many chicken breasts, but but really it's not about how many, right? It's like tuning in, like what works, what feels good. Like and they, just by changing the point system, as I said, and it threw people, oh my God, because, every few years they kind of change the point system. This freestyle that it's on now, when it made that pretty big shift, I mean, people just lost their minds, which change is hard. There's so many reasons, but a lot of it was because the food that they used to, and I get it, because it was the food that they used to rely on was less points, and the points went up significantly because it's got a lot of sugar in it. And Weight Watchers, their point was trying to say, yeah, that's not... let's shift you and kind of let's nudge you in a different direction, that maybe you reach for some fruits and some vegetables and some fish and some lean protein and that kind of thing. But again, you can of course still work the system, because there's still ways. And it, like you said, if you play all those games with the points of like, I'm going to save up and use all of my points in the evening or for this one thing, or go over my points and then try to swap out my points for activity. Like that's the part that makes me cringe, because that's totally a diet. That's not tuning in at all with, how does this make you feel? What do you really like? How much do you need? Tuning into your body, that intuition piece of it. So yeah, it can still, of course, like anything, it can still be manipulated, if you will, and there's no judgment from me, because I did that. I played that game, and I see it in different ways. Although, there is an organization trying to nudge people in different ways and an emphasis. They have the 3 pillars, which is food and activity and mindfulness, wellness. They've added, meditation apps to meditation, the Headspace to their app, and send lots of articles. And they really, really talk in the workshops. They rarely talk about food anymore. It's definitely, we meditated once in a workshop, and that could be just a Colorado thing. I don't know, but I loved it. But but you can, I just get so torn, because again, I feel like it really works for me, but I hate to say that it would work for everyone. I don't think anything does unless they've done the work beforehand.
Well, yeah. But that's why I wanted to have this conversation, right? Because some people did you go into it because you wanted to lose weight? Like, was that even though I know that they're getting away from that, but I looked at their marketing, it's still heavily.
For sure.
And that's okay. Like, again, I've never cared if people want, like when I was struggling with food, no one could have told me not to want to lose weight. Like, right. It's part of why I never did the anti-diet work. Cause I was like, you guys can go over there, but I got to figure this out for myself.
Right.
And that's, I have a high competitor and response. It's not always bad to be a competitor or whatever, right? So I get that. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation, though, is saying, like, if you've done the work to get through where, another example as you were talking, I thought about, since you are you have a high competitor patterns at times, for you, it's fun to kind of gamify it. They're trying to gamify it, right? In a way
totally. Yep.
And because you have found what works for you, and the emotional work we did too is also like learning how to not think that your weight is going to change how your life is, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
And once you really get that, the attachment to weight loss, ironically, is less, and then it paradoxically becomes easier. And it's not ironically less, but the paradox is it gets easier the less you're strangling it, right? But I think one of the things that this is a great example of how it can go wrong is, like, for you, that's genuinely fun right now, right?
Yes.
But you had to do the work to figure out, because competitors are really big on like the external rewards, right? Of like finish lines, whether it's a promotion, whether it's the scale. But you did the work to figure out, why am I, like, let's use your exercise example, or even why be dairy free? Am I going to do that just to be good? Or what's the intrinsic reward beyond weight? How is it going to make travel easier? How is it going to make I don't know if you have allergies, but you fly a lot, right? Like you were able to tie it into whatever the intrinsic rewards beyond weight were for you by doing other work. And I think that's how the same system that they have set up now, because they're giving you new rewards and trying to gamify it, which is very, everyone's trying to gamify things now. Meditation apps do all that stuff because it works for people. If you're not basing your self-worth on what happens with the outcome of these things. And that's the key difference.
Even my leader, are they still they changed everything. I think she's still called maybe she's called a coach. I don't know. I still call her leader. Anyways, we were laughing because part of the app is you can earn points for different things. And they have a whole reward system. And I love it. That like tunes right into me. But we were talking about it at one of the workshops and she laughed out loud. She's like, let's be honest. Like, you're not doing that. And this was to the whole group, not just me. She's like, it's not about getting the water bottle or the yoga mat. You can go buy that right now. I mean, it's not about that. It's the helping. Again, it just taps in. And again, yes, they're trying to gamify it and they're trying to help people create healthy habits. That's what they flat out say. Like, so the more that we have you tune in, like if you attend the workshop and if you move and they don't care how much you move. And if you, for them, track your breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and, water, those kinds of things. It's just helping to set up those habits and then they want to reward you for it. But yeah, so it's a game to me. But yes, when she said that, I laughed because I just took 3 steps back. So I'm like, yeah, it's really not about earning this water bottle, but it's a system that works for me. And that's their push. It's just trying to help people establish those healthy habits.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that I think the issue is I don't think, and this isn't a Weight Watchers or a WW thing, this is a general health wellness industry, is I don't think people realize that most reasons people quote unquote self-sabotage has nothing to do with the food or being willpower discipline. It's somewhere else in their life, right?
Yep.
And so
Agree.
that's the only challenge, is that if you're stuck and you can't, like, I even think people in the avoider pattern, right? Like a lot of my clients have been like, oh, I did Weight Watchers and then I fell off, right? And something else in their life happened.
Yes. Yeah.
For the accommodators, like I've had a couple clients who they're like, oh, I was doing Weight Watchers and it was working. And then my mom got sick and like that accommodator response was, I got to fix this. It's all on me. Right. Or work got really stressful and they took on all the work at work. Right. And so I think that's the only challenge. And again, this isn't just unique to WW, but in general, if you don't really understand the root cause of habit, it's not going to work. I guess.
I totally, completely, 100% agree. Yep.
And that's another thing too, that I do feel like the limitations is that I do still feel like they're trying to tell people what they want to hear. Like you talked about the dessert with 0 points, and like they talked about like you can have snacks.
No, I don't know what dessert 0 points.
Oh, that's what it said because I went on the website and I was like, they have Kate Hudson. They have Kate Hudson on there talking about like she wants to do this for her kids. And I'm like, oh, they test marketed like why like women in their 30s and 40s want to do this. And I'm like, but that this is the cynical side of me, right? Is like that reinforces like the sacrifice reward either or pattern like that.
Well, and it's interesting that you bring her up because in the WW community, when she came on as a spokesperson or whatever they call her, it was so interesting to me because people were pissed.
Really?
They all said that she didn't need to lose weight and it's not for people like her and she's already thin, blah, blah, blah. It was fascinating to read the comments. And then you get a whole slew of other people and WW coming. I don't know if they officially made a statement, but there were different leaders kind of coming on and saying, whoa, you guys are missing the point. That's what we're saying. It's for everyone. Like she just wants to be healthy. Like it's not about the scale necessarily for her. Yes, she had a baby, but that was an interesting, there's still, it's always like anything. This again isn't unique to WW. There's always controversy. They have a connect feature on their app, which I really like because that's the groups like traveling group and a dairy group and there's different things, but then there's a general system and there's people that don't think that people like me that had under 20 pounds to lose belong there.
Wow.
Exactly.
And then why movements hit the ground.
And then people in the WW community saying, whoa, stop. That's not, and they've missed. And again, to me, that signals, it makes me sad because they got a lot of stuff to work on. Like, why are you worried about me? Like, why yeah.
Well, I remember the other point I was going to say is because I was talking to my sister about I still struggle sometimes with how to explain the transformation of how I work with people. I mean, people who listen to the podcast, they have a strong sense, but until you've really gone through it, you can't explain it because we're totally just changing the meaning of food and things in your life. But my sister, I mean, she has celiac, but she doesn't like, she's not really like in the weight loss. She's not in my industry, right? She's a lawyer and the head of a tech startup. So it's like completely different worlds. But she's like, I feel like the anti-diet movements have a lot of rules too, though. And I was like, I never thought of that. You're right. It's like, and I did some research and it's like, oh my God, everyone's creating a system, right? So we want to kind of like pin this on WW, but like I don't know, like any system event, you're going to have some people that are angry about it, I guess is the point. And it's so interesting to me that they thought, the thing that I was cynical about with Kate Hudson was she was like, I just want to find balance. And they show her in this gorgeous kitchen, right? You know, she's like a multimillionaire. I'm like, are they showing her staff? Like, come on. That was like, but that's so interesting. Yeah. This is why like social movements struggle, right? There's like infighting always.
Yes. Like we're all here for the same, that's exactly it. And I was like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. Like, stop. And why? Yeah. What? Yeah. I could go on about that.
But I think that's interesting, though, is that as WW tries to rebrand, right? Rebrand is about values. It's not just what's on the page. Is if they want it to be for everyone, the people this is a great example of the competitor response in people that they can't recognize. It's like they're distancing themselves and isolating themselves from Kate Hudson because she appears to be so much further ahead in the weight loss game than they are versus like, hey, because again, part of I think the emotional and soul hunger for competitors is this self-actualization of like, what benchmarks and metrics do I really care about and that are meaningful to me? And that takes work to do, right? It's not like outside of the gold stars, outside of the promotions, outside of the scale, all the same pattern, like what really replenishes me and fills me up. And like for you on an exercise level, it's yoga and walks and podcasts in the treadmill when you're traveling. And like, but most people have to do that work, I think, so that then they don't get triggered by Kate Hudson, who, whatever her goals are. The other thing, it's kind of switching gears, but also when I was looking at what they were like, you can snack. And again, I think they're trying to be focused on health, but also trying to balance that they are a very big business. Because when I always tell my clients, you can snack if you want, but as your blood sugar heals, if we're getting you healthier, you shouldn't need to snack anymore. Yes,
one of my biggest ahas. I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I was doing all this reflection and I remember you saying that. And I remember in the beginning thinking, that's crazy. Like I snack all the time. But the balancing the blood sugar to me, number one, is the biggest thing. It's just stunning to me. I don't snack anymore. I don't snack anymore. I have 3 meals a day. Period. And in fact, when I find myself wanting to snack, again, it goes back to, why? Is it because my blood sugar is out of balance? Did something trigger it? But it's an entirely different question. And that was the example. That's a great example of like conversations that sometimes can get started at the workshop of like this incessant need to snack. So then people's, what are you snacking on? And they give ideas. And I'm like, oh no, it's not about what to eat when you want to snack. It's digging a little bit for why are you wanting to snack? And again, the balanced blood sugar, I think, is just the biggest, because if you just had carbs all day, if you just whatever it is, but it was such a huge, I was like, holy cow, I don't snack anymore. That's crazy.
Yeah. And that's how I think, again, if you don't look at these accommodate or avoid competing patterns, like if you're an accommodator, you're going to say, you're like, so-and-so asked me to go out to eat. Right. And I want to say yes to her restaurant. I'm going to save all my points. And then you're going to end up crashing, or the avoider is going to like not stick up for what they want to do with the restaurant choice. Right. And then save all their points. And so there's a pacing issue, or like, it's going to not do anything to change these patterns, I guess. And again, the more that we talk about this, I said this on the functional medicine episode, pros and cons, is that any theory or system is only as healthy as the cultural narratives that it's chosen to examine. And
Yep.
we have really, as a culture, we believe the body is a machine. We believe, so that's kind of like a one size fits all. And even though I know they say not one size fits all, like they're still giving you a reductionist looking at food through points, not through like a medical lens. But I think our culture, and again, the medical system is this way as well, still views as long as you're losing weight, it's healthy.
Right.
Instead of like, do you have cancer and that's why you're
Right.
healthy? Right. Or
Right.
do you have Crohn's disease and can't absorb anything? Like, and maybe people can like identify that as being unhealthy. But I think our culture in general still equates like, okay, well, if you're losing weight, you're going to see the positive reinforcement and keep going versus, but is your body malnourished? Right. Which then means we know statistically the biggest implication or the biggest factor of why people gain weight back is dieting itself. And I feel like that's the important piece of this is like, this is a lifestyle for you because you were already working towards that. And now this is just helping you through community and like your personality type,
Yeah.
helping you maintain what you already started and not looking at Weight Watcher or W. We're going to have to edit
I
out every time I said Weight
know. They're never there. It's doomed forever.
Yeah.
For about 50 years they've used Weight Watchers. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But that I think is the important takeaway that I want people to realize. And I think you did such a great job of explaining why it's different for you now, because it's not coming from a deficit, judgmental, shame place. It's coming from my personality needs this kind of support. And that's one thing I think that is really important for people. I also want people to realize is we all need some sort of structure, right? And that's why diets or lifestyles or plans, whatever, or systems can be attractive, right? Because
Yes.
they do help with those systems. And, the work that we did was like, okay, what's the system, the structure required for your blood sugar control and GI health? And it's a different discernment tool, but you're now using this not as the magic bullet or the solution, but the tool. And even when you kicked off, like you discern so much of what you aren't going to get swept up in the meetings and what specifically works for you. It reminds me of, I had a client after we got done working together. She said she wanted to use MyFitnessPal to help with portions, but she said, I totally retract it based on like, I edited it and like know how to use it based on what works for me versus the system that they're giving me to tell me
Yep.
what I should be eating. And I was like, that's my end goal for all my clients is like, you can discern what tool works for you when that provides the right structure. I don't think all structure is bad, right? It's as long
Yes.
as
And I thrive on structure. That's my personality.
me too.
I thrive on structure. I don't do well unstructured. Yeah.
Oh my God. It's so funny. I've always thought of myself as kind of like go with the flow. And then, we just moved everyone. So this is, my first podcast at our new place, but seeing how like, I can't, like Carlos and I had to do a lot of like collaborating during this move. And until I could see the big picture and the system and the plan, I was like, I'm overwhelmed.
Yep.
What's the big structure? And I was like, oh my God, I am so much more like in middle school and high school, I was like in the honors math and sciences, but then I've gotten away from that because I've gotten more into, my master's degree was in liberal arts and more like language and deconstructing that. But I'm like, holy shit, I am so much more logical than I think I am, like, or
Right.
like
Yes.
structure oriented. So I hear that, but I think what I love is you're making this, you're not just taking the system and like accommodators would adapt to it. Competitors would like just trying to beat it. Right. And avoiders will like dabble with Weight Watchers and then quote fall off. But like you've actually found the parts that work for you. And I love that you even found a leader that works for you. I think that's another point I wanted to make up is like, if people are going to try this, find a leader that like you can connect with. And
that's one of my biggest recommendations. People that do try it, that's one of the things I say. And again, I mean, different people need different leaders, but that was a big one. And I mean, they do have a totally online component, whatever, but for me, I like connected. There's a couple that I really love. And yeah, that's one of the biggest thing I say to people. And it's not right or wrong. It's just different, obviously different connections, different people. And some are dedicated of course, to, moms with little kids. That's not going to relate to me. Some are, oh gosh, I went to one and it was so cute. It's all these older senior women. Oh my gosh, God bless them. But they're in an entirely different place than I am. So it's just finding and not all groups are done by kind of personality. They just kind of work that way, and they tend to connect with whoever the leader is. So yeah, I think I can't overstate that enough. It's that person and the people that attend those same workshops. I think there has to be that connection there.
Well, and I think that's the bigger point of, I think the takeaways are, if you really know what works for you and you need support, there's always a learning curve, right? There's new dairy-free products coming out. There's new, what we talked about, kind of that group intelligence, which is what I just realized I could plug the Insatiable community again. We'll be working on that, but a different level, more on the emotional and physical level, what works for you. But that is really important, because I think all of us are so lonely. Like, even though I have great clients, great marriage, great friends, like, I don't work with anyone day to day. Like, I think being in real life with people in community is so healing. And I think,
even if you're an extrovert, I'm an introvert. And so it kind of feels like the opposite, that I would crave going to these meetings on Saturdays, but it's exactly as you said, it's because the relationships in all the other areas, I mean, that's all good, but I don't know, there's something about this particular community. Yeah. And even as an introvert, and I don't talk much during them, but I go, and I don't know, it's something that I look forward to.
Well, Carlos is an introvert. He's like, I love going to the coffee shops where, like, you're around people, but no one talks to you.
Yeah. Totally. Carlos and I could go together and then just sit there and not talk. Yeah. And we both say it was awesome.
Yeah. So is there anything else you want to add? Because I know I kind of went off on a couple tangents, and I think
I love it. No, it's great. Gosh, and I just love having the dialogue. And it's funny because for a little while there, when I was back doing WW, I kept it this secret, because I did feel like, oh God, because there's just controversy around it, and people have really strong feelings. And then finally I was like, no, I'm going to own, this is part of me. This is who I am. It's become a part of my life in a really healthy way. And so just kind of putting it out there. And again, with the caveat of, gosh, what works for you? Someone recently had saw that I was doing WW, and she had texted me and asked me, she said, I'm hungry. I don't know what I should eat for dessert. And I was like, good Lord, I can't tell you. How would I possibly be able to tell you what you should eat right now? Right. And that was just such a ding, ding, ding of, which is a celebration. I'm just in an entirely different place. And yeah, the first time I did it, it was all as a competitor. And I just look back and laugh at beating the system and getting away with it for a little while, and then having that backfire completely.
But I think that's a really important point to end on, is that, at the end of the day, owning our story and whatever we need, and that changes and shifts and changes. And that's what continues to get us healthier into other next levels, right? Is owning what we need. But first we have to identify what that is. And I think that's the big takeaway for people. If you haven't addressed your relationship with food, you don't know what works for you, you don't understand your body, Weight Watchers is probably going to trigger old patterns.
Yep.
And you can start to see your patterns at alishapiro.com/comfort eating quiz to start to see those patterns. However, if you've worked through that, and Tina, I just want to commend you. You have done the work, and it's not easy. And yet when you get to the other side, it's so liberating. And this is now a tool for you that I just love that you're willing to share about it, because
thank you. Well, and it's a tribute to you. Truly. It's just changed my life completely. And my favorite, so when people kind of ask about my journey, so it's worth saying here, my favorite is, Allie and I met at a women's conference, and I remember, and you probably remember, we were sitting at dinner together, and I don't know how the conversation got started, but I said something along the lines of, yeah, well, every time I eat, I feel like shit. I said something like that. And I remember you turning to me and you were like, what? That is not okay. I don't know. I just pretty much always feel terrible. I always feel my stomach, I always feel terrible. And I remember just the look on your face, and you're like, no, stop it. We have to. And it was literally my goal was to not feel like shit every time I eat, was the original goal. And then the one it just morphed into was incredible. It just blew my mind. That's how it was, through my work with you of figuring out all these crazy food allergies and just so many discoveries. So I thank you, and I don't feel good anymore.
It's so funny because I knew we were doing this interview, and you know what I remember about that weekend? That they had that dance party that was really weird, and you and I were both we can't do it.
I'm uncomfortable thinking about it.
everyone felt so free. And I was like, I just can't do this right now.
No, I couldn't. I think I got in trouble because I was laughing.
Yeah. Yeah. That was our nervous response. Right?
Which was not laughing at anyone. I was laughing at myself. I was so uncomfortable.
Yeah. I remember connecting over that, being like, okay, I'm not the only one who can't just takes me a little while to warm up to things.
Totally.
But thank you so much, Tina, for your time and for owning your story and continuing to and helping us see, some nuance and I just think it's funny that I seriously was nervous about not anymore doing this, but the controversy of even maybe finding something positive about WW. But I think we did a good job of
totally.
And
gosh, if only more people in our world could have conversations like this. Imagine.
Seriously. I mean, we could make some progress. So
yeah.
Thank you so much for your time, Tina.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Health Rebels, for tuning in today. Have a reaction, question, or want the transcript from today's episode? Find me at alishapiro.com. I'd love if you leave a review on Apple Podcast and tell your friends and family about Insatiable. It helps us grow our community and share a new way of approaching health in our bodies. Thanks for engaging in a different kind of conversation. And remember, always, your body truths are unique, profound, real, and liberating.